Okay, great. So today is Chapter 2 and 3, navigating both the grants management system as well as that budget template that you'll find in your letter of intent and the budget narrative section. So today we're going to walk you through different pointers of how to get through the system and just make sure you're familiar with it if you're not, as well as talking about the budget. We'll have a Q&A section at the end to go over different components of your budget if you have questions about where that would fit or if it counts as cash match or in-kind match and all of that good stuff. So first off, a big thank you to our partners. I am Noelle Savoyan once again, and Emma Hansen is here with me, and we are in Montpelier at the Agency of Agriculture. And other live sites for viewing are the Springfield Regional Development Corporation, Rutland Economic Development Corporation, Brattleboro Development Corporation, and the Northern Vermont Development Association. So thank you so much to you guys for hosting those sites. It's great to offer at the location for applicants to see the webinar if they don't feel like doing it from their office. So our first component for Chapter 1, I'm actually going to hand the reins over to Emma. She's going to take control, and then Q&A. Feel free to type them now, but we will be getting to those Q&As at the end. Great, thanks, Noelle. So I'm just going to start by going over the grants management system. So the grants management system is what we call the online portal where you will actually be submitting your application. It's where everything happens. And so we refer to it short as our GMS. We don't accept any paper applications. All of them have to be submitted at agriculturegrants.vermont.gov. So when you log in, we strongly encourage you to get in early, start exploring, start playing with it, because while the grants management system is super functional, it's not super intuitive. It's not slick like an iPad. But it definitely gets the job done. But just in case you have any trouble finding what you need or any sort of technical difficulties, we want to make sure that you get in there early enough to flag any questions you have, and then we'd be happy to help you. If we get 40 calls in the hour before all the things are due, we're unfortunately not going to be able to help everyone. So please feel free to reach out, but also please make sure to plan in advance so we can help everyone. So when you actually go in, I'm just going to walk you through what the process will look like so it's not all foreign when you log in for the first time. To register in the system, you're going to go to that website, agriculturegrants.vermont.gov. And then on the main menu, you'll enter your UCID, your password, and click Login. The first time you go, if you don't already have an account, you're going to want to click on Register Here, which you'll see on the right side of the screen underneath the Vermont logo. And you'll need to create an account first and then go back and log in. I just want to make a note to turn off any pop-up blockers, any sort of ad blocking software that you might have, since that's going to keep the website from functioning properly. Also, if you have any issues, we found that sometimes people find an easier time working with one internet provider than another. For example, Chrome versus Explorer. If something feels funny, you should just try using a different browser. The other thing to note is that throughout the GMS, you'll notice the word pre-application. So don't worry, that's exactly the same thing. This is the letter of intent or the LOI. It just has a slightly different name within the GMS. So step 2, right after you log in, this is what you're going to see. This is your main menu, and you're going to want to click right on Funding Opportunity. And right there, you're going to click on either FY17 Business Grant, or when it's live, FY17 Service Provider Grants, whichever one applies to you. Again, service provider is things that are technical service providers. So often, for example, UVM extension is a frequent applicationer. Applicant, I believe is the word I was looking for. I know sometimes businesses who haven't gone through this process before are confused and think, I offer a service to businesses. Does that make me a service provider? It does
not. That still means you're a business, but if you're confused, feel free to ask Noelle or I, and we're happy to run through that with you, see which is a better fit. So after you click on the relevant grant process, you're going to click on Start a New Application. And then you'll get to this page. You're going to fill out the general information page about your project. You'll choose your organization and business from the drop-down menu, which you will have already filled out when you create your account. And then you'll click Save. Once you click Save, you have an application in process that has the number. So next time when you come back, you'll want to click on My Application rather than Funding Opportunities. You do not need to start a new application again. So you don't need to do this all in one go. You can start one, work on it, save, exit. Does not need to happen all in one sit down. So a view will show the completed form if you've done that. You have the option to edit if you want to change the information or to add additional users. People that often have multiple users working on a grant application, you can do that in two different ways. One is to simply just share the login info. For a lot of people, that's the easiest, just to share the username and password. If you'd prefer to have, for whatever reason, keep that information private, but still have different people working on an application, multiple people can create an account, and then the first person to create the grant application can add additional users. The additional users just have to have first created their account in the system. You'll notice when you're using it that you will often need to scroll back up to this top bar to edit or save. Sometimes you'll be working way down below the fold and you need to come back up to edit or save. So step 6, you'll need to go to application forms to start completing the application forms themselves designated for this funding opportunity. And this view is a complete listing of all the parts of the LO application you need in order to submit it. You're going to see things like the general information, which you will have already done. That's the first step. And then you'll see things about the applicant information, the project information, the narrative questions, and the business budget. So these are different smaller pieces that you can complete and check off and save and come back. And when you have checks going all the way down the line, that's when you'll be able to submit. So once there's checks going all the way down, you're good to go. All forms can be edited and saved. All fields marked as required with the red asterisk must have entries, and every form must be marked as complete to submit your application. You'll receive a pop-up message notifying you if you try to submit without completing something. All information must be saved by clicking Save on the form. So again, now it's that green thing you're going to see up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You will receive a pop-up message notifying you that you'll lose information if you back out before saving, but always better to save repeatedly just in case something happens. Note that most forms are editable by clicking Edit at the top part of the page. However, multi-list sections are editable by clicking Add on the section or at the top of the page. Step 7A. Applicant information and project information. After clicking on the form's name, click Edit in the top right-hand corner. There's that Edit button to add your information. When finished, or if you need to pause and walk away, just click Save, and then you can click Mark as Complete. So you need to click Save and then Mark as Complete. Go to Application Forms to return back to the menu. And then 7B, when you get to the narrative, we find it is much easier to write your essay answers in a word processor, such as Microsoft Word, to catch spelling errors and word and letter counts, and then copying and pasting them into the GMS. In a word processor, just make sure you check the character count, as that's what the grant management system actually counts rather than words. And that includes spaces and punctuation. And when you're done, click Save, and then Mark as Complete at the top of the page.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Emma. That was great. A few things to note before we move on to Chapter 3. So that Grants Management System section, we're recording it now, so it will be live on the website tomorrow for you to click on and you can watch it again. The PowerPoint version will also be up, so if you want to slow it down and go frame by frame, you can also do that. On the Apply page, there is also a PDF that walks you through navigating the system. So what you could do as well is you could print out that PDF and have it next to you as you attempt to use the grants management system. And Emma made a really good point about putting everything in Word document first. In terms of steps, and of course you could do this any way you want, I think it might be easier if you're looking at your guide, you have that applicant guide, if you were to print it out, have that by you, or even just work directly in that Word document. Fill the whole thing out, get all of your ideas on paper, and then when you're feeling pretty finalized and ready to wrap it up and thinking you have everything in place, maybe a couple last changes, then attempt that grants management system. That way, as Emma stated, if you're starting from the beginning and putting the system, if something happens and heaven forbid you lose your information, that would be terrible too. So just kind of making it a two-step process, which might help your thinking and planning along the way of your project timeline as well. So here we are, Chapter 3, Creating Your Budget. So we are, let's see what my first, okay, perfect. So in Chapter 1, we talked about what is needed for match in terms of businesses and for service providers. So if you are applying to the business category, and that's the one that's live now, you do need one-to-one match. So whenever you ask for from Working Lands, you need to come up with the same amount in matching funds. However, it doesn't all have to be cash. So 50% of that can be in kind. You can have more cash, you can have 60%, 70%, 100% cash, but at least 50% needs to be cash. For the service providers, if you're applying in the service provider bucket, as we call it, you still need to have one-to-one match to ask. However, that match can be in kind or cash. So there's no requirement of 50%. In terms of indirect costs, service providers are allowed to ask for up to 10% of indirect costs. So that's just a quick little intro before we get into it. So in your guide, there's a section about your budget. It talks about your template. It talks about your narrative. This is what it looks like in the grants management system. What you'll do is go to the top of the screen, click Edit, and then all of these are editable. You can go in each one, put in where you need to. You can leave them at 0 if there's, if let's say there's no travel involved, you can put 0 in. It doesn't have to be, for example, if your project source, one of them is, let's pick machinery equipment. Let's say you're asking for $5,000 from Working Lands. Let's see if my mouse will work here. So $5,000 from Working Lands here. You don't need to have that exact $5,000 here and here. That $5,000, maybe it's in consultant and professional fees. Maybe it's also in salary wages. So it doesn't need to line up across, but that total needs to line up to one-to-one. And once again, we recommend, using Word document or sketching on a piece of paper, just making sure you have everything down before you go into the system. And here is the budget narrative. So this is how it will look like in the grants management system. There will be a white, clear text box for you to write in for each one. You have 1,000 characters to write in for each box. You can just take a look at those and what they say. They're also in your guide, but just for a refresher. One thing that I will point out on this page is the match waiver. The match waiver is pretty rare. We don't have that many businesses or service providers who ask for it. I think we've made it work once in prior grants, but we do have it, and we are willing to explore it. So if, getting your match is seriously an issue, we do want to work with you, and let's say your match isn't in hand by the time the grant agreement starts, we do want to work with you and hear your plan at least. So don't be afraid to use that if you're in need. So to submit your letter of intent, so we walked you through the grants management system and then as well as your budget, which is that hefty portion of your letter of intent. And now it's time to submit. So Emma walked you through this a little bit, but just to confirm on submitting, when everything's complete, so when all of those check boxes are there, you go in and then you finally click submit. If anything has been missed throughout that entire letter of intent, it won't let you submit. So if you're having problems submitting and you're thinking there's something wrong with the system, there could be something wrong with the system. But more likely, it's possible that something has been missed. So always go back and check, and they'll show up in red as well. Upon submission, you'll receive a confirmation pop-up confirming that your letter of intent has indeed been submitted. And it looks like that. Once you've submitted, once you hit that button, you can't go back in for editing. So please make sure you're totally done. Your submit button is like, that's it. It's going and it's gone. So yeah, please make sure you get everything in. And that's it. One thing, and I'll just note this, it's a little out of order here, but I just wanted to note it because it pops up in my head, and then we will go into questions. In terms of letters of support and letters of commitment, it's really important that you have letters of support or letters of commitment if you can get them. We do not accept them in the letter of intent phase. So even if you email them to me, because you'll find that there's no section in the letter of intent where you can submit attachments, I'll write you back and say, I'm really sorry, but hold on to these. You can use them in the full application, but I won't be showing them to reviewers. They're not accepted until you get a yes. That being said, even though we don't actually physically accept them, you can write about that in your business description, in your narrative. Talk about that support you have, name other businesses, name other partners and organizations. That's really helpful to let the board know that your partners and your management team are in place and they're ready to do the work. So, and then one last thing before we go into questions, that is our main Working Lands email address. Emma and I both have access to that. So, or give me a call. I have a couple calls coming in now, actually. I'll check the voicemails after. But if you want to schedule a one-on-one time to talk, that's really great too. And emailing is also easy because you have it in front of you. You can refer back to it. But if you want to bounce some things off me, or if you're having some trouble, just shoot me an email and say, can we set up a time to talk? And I'll shoot a time back to you. How about this day and this time? Does that work? And we can talk for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever you need. So now at this point, we wrapped up chapters 2 and 3. We were very efficient. We'll go into questions if there are any questions. And at this point, so on your little webinar screen, if you're at home, there's a little chat box, and you click on the little question mark, and you can type in. You should be able to see it in your main bar at the bottom, but if you look down, it'll say chat, and you click on it to expand, and you can type messages right in there, and then click send, and then I will receive them. So let's see if we have any yet. Okay, so please remind us, what is the definition of service provider versus a business in this process? So a business is usually a for-profit entity, and that's a blanket statement. There are some nonprofits that could apply that fall into the business category, but usually it's a farm or a furniture maker or someone in forest energy, and it's a business, and maybe they need equipment, or maybe they're trying to grow their business. A service provider, Emma gave a great example earlier. It's like your University of Vermont Extension, or it's like your Small Business Development Center, just to give an example, or a farm and forest viability program. So those organizations that are really providing education or some sort of training or market development to businesses, that could, and those businesses could be applying for their own business. Service providers are applying to assist other businesses, and they're usually nonprofits. Okay, chat box again, if you can't find it. So on your main toolbar, where you see, you should be able to see dashboard, there should be one that says chat. And if you click, it should have a plus symbol on it. If you click on it, it should expand it, and it'll say type your message here. So explore that toolbar. Let me know if you can find it. So one question came in about examples of, and Emma, please chime in whenever you want to. I'm hogging the mic here at the Agency of Ag. So please, so examples of in-kind contributions. So that's a good question. So there's that cash match and there's in-kind match. So your cash match really, is cash. It could be cash that you have sitting in the bank. It could be a loan that you're receiving. Maybe you don't have it quite yet, but you will have it when that grant agreement is finalized. It could also be your labor that you're being paid for during the grant agreement period. So it's anything that really has that monetary, you have cash sitting there that you will be using. In-kind match, for example, could be volunteer labor, or labor, for example, you're not getting paid in cash, but you're going to use those hours and count them as a certain value. Even though there's no actual cash there, that value you're going to be writing in as in-kind. So it's essentially you're working, but you're not going to get paid. And that could be the main applicant. That could be anyone else who wants to contribute to the project. In-kind match could also be donated equipment or a consultant's time. It does need to be, if you're a business, it does need to be related to the project. So it can't really be like land that you're using. If you're using it for your farm in general, it doesn't really count. It has to really correlate with the project. Yes. One question from the Agency of Ag. I'm going to answer that, and I will repeat the question and answer back. Go ahead, Janet.
So it used to be that your labor would be considered part of your match, but that was before there was a specific cash, time, and income. So unless somebody is hiring you and you're receiving a paycheck for that labor, that is only considered in-kind.
Yes, so the question was, is labor cash or in kind, and where do you consider that? If someone's working for you and they're getting paid for this project, that's cash. So if there's money involved and you're paying someone, or you're paying yourself, but there's actual money involved, that's cash match. If you are working on this project, or someone else is working on this project, but they're not going to get paid, then that's in kind. So you can still you're going to use a fair value that you would use, but you're not actually moving cash around, but you're going to mark it in. So that time, basically that time equals cash in this case.
I guess I'm still not clear.
We'll talk about,
So when would someone pay themselves differently than in kind?
So with in-kind, so the question is when would you pay yourself differently, cash or in-kind? If you're putting time into the project, but you're not getting paid. No money. No one's paying you. That's in time. It's essentially volunteer labor. You're going to put a dollar amount in the in-kind box, but there's no actual dollars happening. It's essentially volunteer labor. Okay, I'm going to look through the bank of questions here. Okay. Could it be, yeah, so similar topic coming from an audience member. So in terms of this in kind, could it be fair market value of my employee's time? And that's exactly what it is. You want fair market value, and you will write that in your in kind box. So essentially you're counting that time, you're putting a dollar amount in the in kind budget template, but that person's not actually getting paid. It's the value of their time that you're counting. Okay, one more question on in kind. If an organization or business is paying an employee beyond what they're being reimbursed for through a grant, isn't that an in-kind contribution by that organization? Let me think about this for a minute. If there's any money at all involved, cash dollars that you're paying someone, it's cash match, so not in kind. If anyone's actually paying anyone, and Emma chime in, you're looking at me, is that okay? Good. We're on the same page. If anyone's actually paying anyone, then it would be cash match.
I'm going to go back up to the one about the 20,000 threshold.
Yes. So there is a question came in asking about that $20,000 threshold and what exactly does that mean. Let me just scroll up to make sure I have the whole question. Yes. So we didn't talk about this today, but it's a good point. It's in your guide. If you ask for more than $20,000 as a business in the business project category, you need to show supply chain impact. So what that means is, let's give an example. Let's say you're asking for $10,000 for a piece of equipment, and it's only benefiting your business. You're only going to be using it. That's a good example of below $20,000. Let's say there's 5 other businesses in your area that are similar to yours maybe, and they also could really benefit from that piece of equipment. But for you to buy that piece of equipment, it actually isn't the same piece of equipment. Let's say you need to buy one that's $25,000, just as an example. It could be $10,000, and that if there's supply chain impact there, that's fabulous. But if you're going to go over $20,000, let's say you want to buy a $25,000 piece of equipment, it needs to impact other businesses as well as your own. So you need to demonstrate either another business that it's helping or perhaps a distributor or someone else on that supply chain who's also benefiting and seeing outcomes from this grant in addition to your business as the lead applicant.
And just to add a couple more examples, because we always think of equipment sharing first because people have done that, and that's a great example. But I think sometimes people are intimidated by that too, but it could be anything. And lots of times when businesses grow, they also start impacting other businesses. So, for example, we funded a couple of big wood pellet projects last year, and so those businesses, because they've grown so much, are going to be buying a lot more wood from other area businesses. So as you grow as a business, you just need to point out how you're going to be impacting other businesses in your community and how this is going to benefit your community as a whole.
Great answer, Emma. So a few other questions came in surrounding that topic. If I ask for $20,000 but not $20,001, do I have to complete the impact paperwork? You do not, but the deal is that it's a competitive process. So there could be 2 or 3 other similar projects that are asking for $20,001, and they have great supply chain impact. And the board would probably look to the outcomes of the project. So I would say use your best judgment in terms of when to talk about supply chain and when not to.
It's also not additional paperwork. It's the application readers will garner the supply chain impact from the same narrative that everyone filled out. It's no additional work.
Exactly. It's just an additional question where you need to define that supply chain impact. So one other question that came in was, if you're doing the supply chain impact, does it have to be on other businesses, or can it be on the community as well? I think Emma answered that really well, but it can absolutely be on the community. It depends on the project. Great. Okay, a couple here from the room.
So one is, and I know this is probably simple, but I'm just not seeing it. So with that 100% match, let's say your total project is anticipated to cost $14,400.
Yes.
Do you ask only for $7,200?
Yes.
So that's your grant request.
Yes.
Because it's the 100% match.
Exactly. Yeah. So the question here is, if you're asking for $14,400, or sorry, if your total project is $14,000, basically, what do you ask from Working Lands to make that work? And that would be, you're asking $7,000 from Working Lands, and that other $7,000 is going to be your match, whether it's cash or in kind or however you come up with it. It's also up to you what your total project is. So that's something to really think about. I would say really focusing in on the outcomes before the actual, like, I need a piece of equipment, but focusing on what are the outcomes from the project. What outcomes do you want to see? And then working backwards. So if I want to get this, this, and this, what is that project? And then thinking within that total amount, what am I going to ask from Working Lands and what is my match? Because maybe it's not just one piece of equipment. Maybe it's 2 pieces of equipment that can really get you to those outcomes that you're trying to get to.
And the other question that I had is, how did the decision about service providers not having to do any cash match versus business applicants having to do 50%? It seems to me that it's much easier for service providers to come up with actual liquid cash than it is for the business applicants.
So that's a good question. I will do my best to answer it, and then I can also go back to the board and ask them. But the question is, how did we come up with businesses have to come up with some cash, and service providers, they can have cash or in kind? Usually, just to preface, usually the service providers do have a good amount of cash there. It's not all in kind. I think the biggest portion of it being businesses are for-profit, and service providers are nonprofit. So that was, I think, the first reasoning. And the second reasoning that comes to my mind, and this may not be entirely accurate, but the board is very interested in funding businesses that have some experience already and are profitable and are moving to that next level and getting to that next growth stage. So they should already have some cash that's moving that they can be able to put into this project. The board rarely funds startups because they do really want to see that experience, and they are looking for a business that's at a certain growth stage versus a business that's maybe been around forever, but it's like a Hail Mary, like, I need this just so I can keep going. We'd rather, instead of giving them a grant, we'd rather refer them maybe to a viability program to work out the deeper issue. So that's my initial reasoning, and then If anyone wants to talk more about that, I can see how the board feels.
So, for example, someone like Black River, is that considered, let's say they were applying for it, and I'm not saying they need to or are planning to, but they would be considered a business applicant versus a service provider?
Yeah, so one example, and then we'll get back to the audience. I see a couple other questions over there, but for example, I just would pull up a Vermont business that most of us are aware of is Black River Meats, or Black River Produce. They would indeed be a business, and if they're applying, they would most likely, and they have in the past, they've gotten a grant, and they actually received a grant that had heavy supply chain impact, and they had that cash match as well. Yeah, of course. Okay, so could supply chain impact be that you would be able to sell a product to another business at a wholesale price on which they would be able to make a marked up profit margin? It definitely could be. It depends on the project. It depends on the situation. But if you can show that the other businesses in the supply chain or, whoever you're impacting in the supply or value chain is having positive outcomes that you can track in this project, then it does count. Okay, are feasibility and market studies eligible for service provider grants? I would say this year we're really focused on, and it will say it directly in, so I'm going to answer this knowing that the service provider RFP is released on Monday the 17th, but my gut says no. My gut says it won't be eligible, and that the service providers will have to be focused on direct business assistance, to answer your question. And I think, let's see, here's one more. Does the impact have to be new? It needs to be related to your project. And so since your project is a new part of your business, it would be new. It might be an expansion of impacts that you already have. So you might be growing impacts that you already have. You might be doubling or tripling them. But it isn't necessarily a new kind of impact that you're having. But it does need to be different. You can't just list off things that you're already doing. And the impacts could be new, but the businesses you're working with maybe stay the same. So maybe you already have a group of businesses that could really benefit from something, some sort of project. Is a business that is in its first year of standalone operation considered a startup? Last year I had sales, but they were under the umbrella of another business I run. So that's a really good question. I would actually say let's talk more in depth about that offline. One thing that is really helpful, the board has actually taken quite a bit of time putting together a stage of business development definition document. So I would say you should look there first. And that is, if you go right to the apply page, there's a link and it says stages of business development. And the board has created it so it actually relates not only to general stages of business development, but to working land, so farm and food and forestry and forest product businesses, stages of development. So check that out first, and then be in touch with me, email or phone, and we can talk through it in terms of your project and if it's a good fit.
Mm-hmm. And startups are eligible, and they are funded, but the main thing that they look for is that your business is prepared to take on growth. This project will help it grow, and often startups are just not in that position. So that's where that comes from, really.
Nice.
So when I keep hearing a lot of references to growth.
Mm-hmm.
So what if you are looking to make improvements existing business, but you aren't necessarily trying to grow your business, but become more efficient and economically viable through some changes?
Sure. So a question from here at the Agency of Ag is, what if your project isn't focused on growth, but it's focused on improvement? So I would say take that improvement and think about what the outcomes are. So let's say that improvement of something, whether it's a barn or a facility or a machine or whatever. My mind is limited right now, but it could be so many things. What is it leading to? So if it is leading to efficiencies in terms of maybe production, we consider that growth. So production efficiencies or growth in income or hiring one person or having more, even we look at quality measures too. So being able to have a sick day once in a while or working an 8-hour shift instead of a 15-hour shift. So those do count as growth measures. Anything else from the audience?
I have one more.
And we have one more from the Agency of Ag.
So, is it possible to have two different things in your application? So, I recall in the past there were grants for, say, an intern plus marketing materials. So is that possible to have two different distinct focuses, but all within the same business?
So the question here from the Agency of Ag is it possible to have two different things within that project? And absolutely. So sorry. Absolutely. That budget template, you'll see different portions. So you could have salary for someone related to a project. You could have equipment. You could have marketing costs for packaging design that you're doing. If it's part of that same project that you come up with and it leads to those outcomes that you define, absolutely. So it can be whatever you want as long as it fits within your project. So thank you so much, everyone. The recording of this presentation will be available tomorrow right on the Apply page. There will be a link that says Webinar Recording, Chapter 2 and 3. The PowerPoint will also be available. So you can click on the PowerPoint and go through things at a slower pace if you felt we rushed through it. And feel free to please email me and to set up a time to talk, or email me with any questions, and Emma and I will respond that any questions you might have about your project. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope you enjoy the blue skies. Have a great night.